Hey guys, it's Sagar, and in this video I'm going to compare the cameras on the OnePlus 11 with the ones on the iPhone 14. Unlike in the past, there is not a very huge price gap between both these phones, so I think it is a fair comparison. Although OnePlus 11 costs a bit less than the iPhone 14, it comes with a triple camera setup at the back, and with the wide lens letting us take macro shots, it actually acts like a quad camera setup. iPhone 14 on the other hand just gets two cameras on its back. If your purchase decision hangs on the fact that which of these two phones has better cameras, then you have clicked on the right video. I'm going to compare over 150 image and video samples from both these phones combined, and I think that should be enough to give you a fair idea of which of these phones take better images and videos in various lighting conditions. To keep this video from getting too long, I will just leave the camera specs for both these phones in this slide. You can pause the video and go through them if you want. Let us start by taking a look at the videos that both these phones can capture. Main camera on the OnePlus 11 can shoot 8K videos at 24fps, and this is something that iPhone 14 can't even do. iPhone's camera just doesn't have enough megapixels to shoot at 8K resolution. These videos from the OnePlus 11 look amazingly crisp. They are huge in terms of file size, and like most of the other people, even I don't have an 8K display to watch these videos on, so I just prefer to shoot 4K videos on all my phones. iPhone's main camera is capped at shooting 4K videos at up to 60fps. OnePlus 11 can also shoot at this resolution. Both the videos look very good, but there is just something about the videos from iPhones which makes them look smoother and more natural. OnePlus's videos also look good, but the colors in its videos don't seem to be as they were in real life, and there is also a yellowish look to them. If I could pause the video here for a bit, we can see shadows being a bit darker on iPhone's videos, but at least its video is clean, whereas one from the OnePlus 11 seems to be filled with a ton of noise. Now these videos have been taken in overcast conditions, and both these phones take clean and crispy videos when in sunny lighting conditions. Even the 1080p videos look smoother from iPhone, and ones from OnePlus 11 seem to have a bit of jitters with each of the steps which I am taking. This is surprising because it has OIS and EIS working together. For low-light 4K videos, OnePlus seems to be applying a bit of sharpening, which is making everything in its video look a bit sharper, while things look a bit softer in iPhone's low-light video in comparison. That being said, just like during the daytime, although a bit soft, iPhone's videos look much cleaner, whereas OnePlus's video is just filled with a lot of noise all around. I really can't believe that OnePlus is not doing anything to reduce this noise. Here's a video from the front-facing camera of the iPhone 14 and the OnePlus 11. You can see how both these phones are handling the overall colors of the scene, exposure, and stabilization when I am walking around with them. iPhone can shoot these videos at 4K 60fps, while the OnePlus is limited at shooting 1080p 30fps videos with its front-facing camera. I don't even think it has stabilization turned on. There is a stabilization option on the OnePlus 11. Let me just turn it on and see if that makes any difference. Yeah, these videos now look much better. It is cropping on my face a bit, but I think the stabilization should have been turned on by default. Who would want to take unstabilized videos with their phone? iPhone seems to be handling the dynamic range much better with its front-facing camera, while OnePlus is just overexposing most of the areas. With that, let us move on to the images, starting with the ones which I took during the daytime with their main cameras. Right away, you can tell that both these phones capture really amazing images in plenty of light. Another thing that you might have picked up is that you can see a slightly wider scene in the shot from the OnePlus 11 compared to the iPhone 14. I think you can see that more clearly in this set of images. I clicked them from the exact same place, but you can see more space above the structure and a bit more of the wall in the lower part of the image from the OnePlus 11. Well, this is because OnePlus gets a 24mm lens on its main camera, whereas iPhone 14 comes with a 26mm lens. I think it is nice that OnePlus lets us capture ever so slightly wider looking scene even with its main camera. Both these phones capture slightly different looking images. iPhone's images seem to be more natural, or I should say closer to how I could see the scene with my own eyes, whereas OnePlus seems to be clearly applying a lot of processing in its images. It made the sky look darker and also lifted the shadows a bit. I'm not saying that this is the wrong approach, I'm just saying that the difference is clearly visible to me. Both are also very different in terms of capturing the overall color temperature and white balance of the scene. iPhone again tends to make the scene appear as it was, whereas the OnePlus tends to be on the warmer side, and it even appears to be adding a bit of yellow or orange hue to all of its daytime shots. It doesn't look bad. If anything, it makes these shots which I took on a warm sunny day look even warmer. But these scenes actually look more like you could see from the iPhone. That being said, I still think most people will still like the images coming out of the OnePlus 11, as iPhone's images, no matter how close to reality they are, just seem to be a bit dull in comparison. It has more contrast in its images, which is making the shadows appear a bit too dark, whereas OnePlus tries to lift them up in its images. Coming to the overall colors, now because the iPhone 14 adds more contrast to its shots, ones where you have a lot of color appear to be more saturated compared to the ones from the OnePlus 11. sometimes almost too saturated for most people's liking. OnePlus's colors look a bit brighter and some people might like them a bit more. It is still adding an overall warm orangish hue to these images, which I grew to not like that much in all of my images. I guess this is the Hasselblad look that they wanted to achieve, or it's their way of emulating colors coming out of an Hasselblad camera. But I prefer to have true to life or natural looking colors in my images, so this got a bit annoying for me after the first few images. I do understand that color is a personal choice and every individual person perceives them in a different way. So what looks good to me might not look the same to you and vice versa. So colors from which of these two phones you end up liking will completely depend on your personal preference. Moving on to the HDR shots. This is one of the areas where Apple has been struggling since some time. A few years back, they did a fantastic job with the smart HDR algorithm, and I think it peaked around the iPhone 11 or 12 series, and we have barely seen any improvements in it since. Whereas Android smartphones have gone well past them during this time. I mean, just look at these images. I don't even feel that this is a competition anymore. Yes, in some of the very specific case scenarios, iPhone does really well with the dynamic range, but that is so rare that I couldn't even replicate it in all of the shots which I took. I'm showing you just 5 of the best HDR shots in this video, but I actually took over 15 images in challenging lighting conditions, and in all of those, iPhone 14 is just as far behind the OnePlus 11 in terms of dynamic range as it is in these images. iPhone will either preserve the shadows or lift the highlights, but for some reason it is not doing both. Sometimes it does both, as we have seen in some of my previous videos, but for this comparison, for all the 10 to 15 HDR shots which I took for this video, it did not do well in any. OnePlus 11 on the other hand does really well to preserve the highlights, and it also brings up the shadows enough so we see a balanced looking image. Its images obviously look processed, and if we zoom in, they are filled with a lot of noise as opposed to the images from the iPhone 14. But when I have these two images side by side, would you ever pick the one from the iPhone 14 in the first look? I really don't think so. Both the main cameras are very quick at setting the focus on any nearby object. This is very important while taking close-up shots, because you would not want to spend unnecessary amount of time waiting for the camera to set the focus. The resulting close-up shots look amazing from both the phones. You can get a bit more closer to the subject on the iPhone 14. But the minimum focusing distance on the OnePlus 11 is very impressive considering it comes with a much bigger size image sensor. The subject is in perfect sharp focus from both of them, and thanks to the wide aperture, the background in both their shots is blurred out very nicely. OnePlus is again making the colors look a bit different. This first was how it looks in the iPhone's image, while OnePlus made it look much darker and warmer. For all of these shots, I just pointed the cameras at these subjects and moved it closer. I did not tap on any of the subjects for setting the focus, so you see how good both of them are at focusing. Speaking of getting closer to the subject, OnePlus has a slight advantage at this as it gets the macro mode. It doesn't get a dedicated macro camera, but the wide camera gets autofocus, and that lets this lens focus on very close by objects, allowing us to take incredibly detailed macro shots. These are 12 megapixel pinned macro shots, but they are being captured via the 48 megapixel wide camera, and that is the reason these are one of the most detailed macro shots that you will get out of any smartphone. While we are on the topic of the wide camera, let us see how ones on both perform while capturing wider scenes. First of all, these lenses on both the phones do a very good job of letting us capture a much wider field of view compared to the primary lens. For some reason, iPhone's 12 megapixel wide shots are more detailed than the 12 megapixel pinned wide shots on the OnePlus 11, which are actually being captured by the 48 megapixel sensor. I didn't expect to see this. Both of them again have the same difference in the color temperature and white balance, just like we saw from their main cameras. But the wide camera on the OnePlus 11 is not making the images appear as warm as its primary one. You won't see that much of a difference between the color temperature and white balance of the normal and wide shots from the iPhone 14. But we do see a big difference between the wide and normal shots from the OnePlus 11. You can clearly see that its wide shots are not as warm as the ones from the main camera, and I think this looks a bit better. OnePlus gets a third dedicated camera with 2x optical zoom, whereas on the iPhone, normal and wide cameras are all you get. You will either have to go with the iPhone 14 Pro if you want a zoom lens, or go with the digital zoom route on the iPhone 14. Here is a 2x digitally zoomed in shot from the main camera of the iPhone 14 compared with the one from the 2x optical zoom camera from the OnePlus 11. The flowers appear to be a bit soft in iPhone's image while they are sharper from the OnePlus. These flowers were actually moving around due to the wind, so here is an image of a still object. OnePlus is still capturing sharper images, but the difference in the detail levels in the two is not that big now. Here is another shot and we see the same thing. OnePlus should have given us 3x or more optical zoom on this telephoto lens, because 2x images can be easily achieved by digitally zooming in on the images from the main 50 megapixel sensor. Speaking of the 50 megapixel sensor on the OnePlus 11, here is its full resolution image compared with the 12 megapixel one from the main camera of the iPhone 14. The 50 megapixel shots obviously have more details, but you will have to zoom in 5 to 6 times to see those extra bit of details. It is the same when you compare 12 megapixel bin shots from the OnePlus 11's main camera with the 50 megapixel ones from the same sensor. These 50 megapixel shots are also huge in terms of storage space, and I don't think anyone zooms in so deep on an image on their smartphone. I think for most of your shots, it is best to stick with the default 12 megapixel mode on the OnePlus 11. I mean, unless you're clicking images of some landscape or architecture, because that is when you would want to capture every possible detail in your shot. Coming to the portrait shots. I love taking portrait shots with my phones, and for the longest time, iPhones have been my go-to phones to click these images. That being said, I feel like OnePlus has come really close with the portrait shots this time. Edge detection is really good and pretty much similar from both the phones, but they can definitely use some improvements via software updates to refine it even further. iPhone tries to keep the skin tones appear natural and as they were in real life, while the OnePlus 11 for some reason is trying to brighten the faces in all of its portrait shots. I might still stick with the iPhone for taking portrait shots, but at the same time, I think OnePlus has done really well with the portraits this time. If you are interested, it also lets you shoot 2x zoomed in portrait shots thanks to the telephoto lens. Both can take portrait shots of objects and they are really good at it. OnePlus is however still adding the yellow hue to its images, which you can clearly see here. Which one do you think took better portrait shots? Let me know in the comments. That brings us to the images which are took in artificial and lower lighting conditions. Main camera on the OnePlus 11 gets a slightly bigger image sensor, but it is the iPhone 14 which is capturing slightly more details in its low light images. Both of them get OIS and wide aperture, which is helping them gather all this light and deliver images like this. Now OnePlus 11 is completely throwing the colors off. Lights at this restaurant were not as warm as they look in its images, and it did the complete opposite in this one. It made the lights in this scene appear a lot cooler than they were. So both phones take a different approach when the light gets lower. iPhone is a bit more true to life, but I would agree that some of these shots on the OnePlus 11 are better to look at. Like for example this shot. I love how the warm wood looks on the ceiling in the shot from the OnePlus 11. iPhone just makes it look dull. I'm not saying that this is true about all the shots, but some of the shots on the OnePlus's camera are ready to be shared on social media as they are, while you will definitely have to make a few edits to the images from the iPhone 14 to make them look a bit more attractive. Once you get to even lower lighting conditions, you can switch to the night mode on both these phones and they start taking much better looking images with lot more details and less noise. Thankfully both these phones are quick at taking the night mode shots, so you don't have to hold the phone steady for a long time for these images. As you can see in these shots, both the phones struggle with the lens flare issues. It is much worse for some situations like this when you have the light frame directly in the shot or when you have the light source just outside the frame. I think the ship is sailed for both the phones, but I just hope both the companies find out some way to make this a bit better on their next generation devices. After clicking and looking at all these shots, it is hard to let go of the fact that iPhone's images are somehow sharper than the ones from the OnePlus 11. I did not expect this since the 12 megapixel binned images from the OnePlus's main camera are supposed to have more details and less noise in them. Combining 4 pixels into one results in a much bigger sensor which is supposed to capture more details, resulting in sharper low light shots, but sadly for some reason we don't see that happening here. Somehow, iPhone's lower megapixel sensor is capturing slightly sharper images in these lighting conditions. Wide cameras on both these phones are capable of taking night mode shots, but this is where the OnePlus 11 does a much better job. I mean, its images might not be the best looking ones, but they still look much better than the wide shots from the iPhone 14. That brings us to their front facing cameras. OnePlus gets a 16 megapixel selfie camera, whereas iPhone gets a 12 megapixel one. Despite of this, selfies from the iPhone 14 look much more detailed and sharper than the ones from the OnePlus 11. For some reason, there is a faded look to the faces and areas near it in the selfies from the OnePlus 11, and this doesn't look really good. Most of its selfies look almost faded, and even the skin tones and overall colors are messed up in these images. I don't get it how OnePlus could have such good image processing for their rear cameras and at the same time mess up the selfies so badly. Edge detection is good from both the phones while taking portrait selfies, and since everything other than the face is blurred out, these portrait selfies from the OnePlus 11 seem to be a bit more detailed now. But all of the other things remain the same. It tries to do something weird with the faces in terms of exposure, and the colors are still nowhere close to real life. So if you like to take a lot of selfies, you should definitely stay away from the OnePlus 11. So there you have it. We have seen close to 160 image and video samples from both these phones combined, and this time there are some clear areas where each of these phones perform better, and we could even easily make out their weaker areas. OnePlus has a high resolution camera, but in the default mode it is not capturing the most detailed images. Add to that the orangish yellow hue in all of its images and inaccurate colors and white balance, and anyone would be ready to write it off. But then it comes back really strong with the amazing dynamic range while capturing HDR shots, and the option of shooting macro shots is definitely a plus point. iPhone 14 takes amazingly crisp images for having just a 12 megapixel main camera. It produces much better looking colors, but this time it falls way behind in the HDR department. Personally for me, the portrait shots look much better from the iPhone 14 because of the extra details and the fact that it handles the color in a more natural way. For low light, it is a close call, but I would again have to pick the iPhone 14 because it captured less noise and slightly more details in the shots that we saw. Video resolution options are plenty on the main camera of the OnePlus 11, and if you're looking to capture 8K videos, it is your only option. But I think most people getting these phones would end up shooting 4K videos, and those look smoother and much more natural from the iPhone 14. Now while deciding between these two, think about what kind of images and videos you take and look at which of these is better at that and make your decision that way. So there you have it. Finally, a OnePlus smartphone which can go head to head with the cameras on an iPhone and in certain cases even leave it behind. These have been my thoughts about these cameras. After looking at over 160 image and video samples, which one do you think performed better? And if you are looking to spend close to 65,000 rupees on a new phone, which of these would you pick? Let me know in the comments. That is it for this video guys. Please hit the like button if you enjoyed this video and subscribe to the channel for a lot more quality tech videos like this. You can also check out some of the other videos from this channel. This has been Sagar and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Take care.